Welcome back to the fucking TCMVU! Fucking sicko! Today, we are going over the entire TCMV Goldenage timeline, or timelines basically the whole classic story, and everything leading up to Silver Age.
Fuck KITTS, bruh.
If you want disclaimers and the rules we follow, please watch the introduction video. Introducing the TCMV also. We won't have any background music because the fucking TTS is a pain in the amethyst and cock. But alright, let's begin. Part 1, Homiverse. Disclaimer. Any non-canon roleplays or stories or memes will be left out. A majority of this is pieces of memories, and few archived things. Please note that a majority of the original TCMV stuff is now lost media. So of course some stuff will be improvised to help turn the majority of these timelines into one consistent story. Note that the stories were retconned extremely, often back during these times, so we will try our best. Things like the 22 roleplays and scrapped movie stories will not be included. Enjoy! Shadow and Phantom met in the Dragon Dimension. They were a species of dragons named the Spirit Dragons. Shadow was dark, blue and dark purple. Phantom was black with blue highlights. They became extremely close, and then eventually they ran into Dark Satan, a black dragon, and eventually the two developed a rivalry with him. Eventually Phantom met a male black werewolf named Siren, who she became romantically involved with. Shadow despised him and developed a sort of rivalry with him. They also mastered humanoid forms.
Eventually, Dark developed his own team of villains to take down Shadow and Phantom. This consisted of Blood Moon and Death. Blood Moon was a twisted evil red clone of Phantom. And Death was an evil spirit in Black. The 3 heroes and 3 villains fought all the time, and Shadow and Phantom were often close to death. One time when Phantom and Shadow were resting, Dark came by and used magic to relinquish Shadow's fearlessness and bravery and self-confidence. And then he terrorized Shadow as Shadow was absolutely terrified. And he kidnapped Phantom and left. Shadow had to conquer his fears and kill Dark, and then he turned back to normal. Death was a vicious fighter. He would always leave Shadow near death. Death would brutally tear and destroy Shadow. However, Shadow killed him by ripping out his vocal cords, and Phantom beat Blood Moon as well. The Dark was not pleased. Eventually, Eventually, Shadow met Raven, a black-haired blind dragon girl. Phantom and Shadow left in the Dragon Dimension and visited Earth. Not long after Dark would battle Shadow and Phantom on a city beach. However, Shadow won the fight. Eventually, Shadow and Phantom found an abandoned cabin and claimed it for themselves. One snowstorm, Raven was flying through the snow trying to find Shadow. She crashed into their cabin and injured her wing. Shadow found her and helped her down and took her into the cabin and began to help heal her wounds. He took care of her and even fed her. Eventually, the two fell in love.
Fast forward to 2019.
Rico, Akina, and Venus went to the same high school, and at that school, they all signed in, and all 3 of them were placed into the dorm. Oh dear God, I'm black and Latino. Sorry about that, we were jorking it.
Eventually, hunters came and blew up the entire school. Venus was heartbroken. Dot and Rico and Akina got into a huge argument outside the rubble. Eventually, Rico left and wasn't seen, for a very long time. Eventually, Akina and Venus transferred to a new high school. Soon Blake Lavender Loopers enrolled in the school, and he was the most popular kid there. He had his bare chest and abs showing. Underneath his black jacket, he had billboards with his face on them, and every girl was vying for his attention. One day at the school, Akina got into her hunter gear, revealing that she was a hunter. Blake's entire family was killed, one fateful day, by hunters. When the hunters broke in and killed them, Blake was only a kid when this happened, and they burned his house down with him inside. Akina had a fight with Blake in the middle of the school, and eventually it escalated as they exited the school, and Blake almost killed Akina, but he was injured and she fled the scene. Venus saw him as he walked back into the school, and she patched him up, later down the line. A new kid came to the school. His entire face was covered in bandages, and he had a blue outfit. He had dove wings, and he appeared to be a human-dove hybrid. He explored the roof of the school before tripping and face-planting onto the hard concrete. Blake was the rarest hybrid of all time. The cat-wolf hybrid Venus was a black-wolf hybrid. Akina was a blue-wolf hybrid. Soon, Blake, Venus, Akina, and Oliver Hamilton Quinn all met, and Akina apologized to Blake, and Oliver revealed his true form. A red-haired phoenix human hybrid, with bright red wings. Akina expressed her regret and pain ever since she started working for the hunters. The four friends decided to share a dorm. That dorm happening to be Dorm 69. Soon enough, the four friends banded together and became known as the Protectors. They would protect hybrids and humans from the hunters. Very often they would fight the hunters and even go to hunter bases and attack. Bloody and violent fights. One trip to a hunter base had Blake getting the hots for Venus. And soon enough they began dating. Akina also saved her long-lost lover Tikna, a girl with purple and blue hair. Eventually Blake and Venus and the others took a trip to France for vacation. And on that trip, Blake and Venus went on a date. What they didn't know was every French girl in Italy is obsessed with Blake, and Blake had to escape the place with Venus before he got diddled by the French. Even French boys were trying to get a piece of Venus. Later, the Protectors returned to Nevada, where the school is. They went to a Las Vegas beach, and they hung out there for a while. Turns out, Oliver Quinn was a phoenix red wolf hybrid. He turned into a dog at the beach, and decided to stay that way. Suddenly, Blake was cursed, and he became a wolf as well. That the only way to break the curse was true love's kiss. Venus was uncomfortable, but she gave in and kissed Wolf, Blake, on the nose, and he turned normal. The Protectors returned to the school, and it had been a while since any hunters had been seen. A year later, Blake went shopping for a wedding ring for Venus, and he finally found one. Venus had developed alter egos. Kind of like a devil and angel. On her shoulder, they had physical forms as well. The angel would go on to be known as Dawn, and the demon would go on to be known as Luna. Eventually Blake found Venus, and he proposed to her, and Venus said yes. Eventually Venus got pregnant. Their child would go on to be named Haru. However, the Protectors were not retired. Even though they were a bunch of teenagers, trouble still awaited. Eventually, an army of Wendigos attacked the hybrid forest. The Protectors rushed to action, and they fought the entire army of Wendigos. Oliver got impaled in the side with a small tree, but he walked it off. Eventually, right before a Wendigo almost killed Blake, Oliver sacrificed himself and let himself get impaled into a tree, where he said his goodbyes before dying. The Protectors mourned, and eventually some mysterious people arrived. A blonde, wolf hybrid man named Bloodfang walked out of the dark side of the forest. With him was a dark black-haired wolf hybrid guy whose name happened to be Haru. Venus was shocked. Bloodfang was Venus's father. Bloodfang took Venus back to her home, the Blood Clan territory. Bloodfang was the king of Blood Clan, and Venus was the Blood Clan princess. Back at Blood Clan, Venus had some friends that were like brothers. Named Damien and Griffin, they had white and grey hair. The protectors followed her to the Blood Clan, and they met a few new faces. Venus also gave birth to Haru. Eventually, Bloodfang showed his true colors, and Blake and Venus teamed up to take down and kill Bloodfang. However, he wouldn't stay dead for long. The gang returned to their home. A few months go by, and Haru has accelerated growth. Eventually, a man with red eyes and black hair, a black wolf hybrid, broke into the dorm. While Haru was playing on his tablet, eating dragon waffles, and demanding mac and cheese. The Black Wolf Man, kidnapped Haru and fought each of the protectors, and then left with Har, and took him to the hunter's headquarters. He was the hunter leader.
Blakely cocks your sick dick.
The protectors followed JAC back, and also since Dotover was a phoenix, he was reborn by now. The protectors had an all-out battle with Jace, winning the battle and then bringing Haru back home. Jace became the protectors' arch nemesis, and it led to a crazy fight. JACE attacked the school, and they fought him off, and the battle culminated to the soccer field, as Jace and the protectors were both weakened. And then Venus pulled out the Blood Splitter, an extremely dangerous gun that Bloodfang created way back when. Venus shot Jace one time. Immediately his blood was sucked out, and he imposed instantly a bloody and gory death. However, this wouldn't be the last of him. The protectors returned home, and Blake finally proposes to Venus. Venus says yes. Venus and Blake prepared for the wedding, and they held their wedding at Blood Clan territory. Once Blake and Venus kissed, they were announced the new King and Queen of Blood Clan, and Luna screeched and rolled down a hill in glee. Blake and Venus found and began living in an abandoned cabin in the forest, and they began their honeymoon. AKN. And Jack also started becoming close. Jack, being a creepy guy with blonde hair and a tutu who used to scare Rico back at the school. Also Akina and Takina broke up. Oliver met Marianne and fell in love with her. He also met a blue-haired man named Psycho, and he became Oliver's arch nemesis. Eventually, Bloodfang somehow returned with black hair, and he attacked Venus, and cut one of her eyes out, and gauged her chest and stomach. Then left her bandaged up in the snow. Eventually the protectors found her, and took her back to help her out, and patch her up. And they gave Venus an eye patch with a flower on it. Venue single quotes as green lead crown was upgraded. To a steel league crown since the wedding as well. Oliver discovered the Echo clan. Blake discovered the Delta clan, and Arian, the white-haired leader of Delta clan, took Blake in and began training him. Suddenly the hunters returned and hijacked a plane. They killed the passengers. On board, the protectors reunited, and Blake drove up a mountain, and he got into a near-fatal car crash. But when Oliver and Venus and Akina got to the plane, they teleported Blake up there. They fought the hunters on the crashing plane. Blake and Oliver got into an argument after killing the hunters, and it led to Oliver teleporting Blake into a cage with 100 French girls. Eventually they safely landed the plane, and Blake and Oliver made up. Eventually, Jace somehow returned, and with him a Wendigo and Hunter. Army that he petrol-ed through a forest and then an open field. The protectors came together and fought against the army in an insane war. And it lasted a very long time. After a hunter shot Venus in the stomach, Blake was overcome with rage, and he went angel, god, demon, cat, wolf mode, he grew wings, and his eyes went demonic, and he did a war cry, and he slammed down and took out the entire army and nearly killed Jace. But Jaxar fled the scene. Soon after that, Jace sent 200 poison bombs through Las Vegas completely, evacuating the city, and by that I mean death. Luna and Dawn rushed to the city as Jace got there, and Jace had a crazy 1v2 with them, and it lasted a while before the rest of the Protectors got there, and then the battle began to turn. Eventually the Protectors won, and Jace fled again. A mysterious space ship landed in the city, rubble, and the Protectors stood there before Rico himself walked out. The Protectors and Rico happily reunited before Rico took them to space, and asked for their help for a crashed satellite on Mars. He gave the Protectors protective spacesuits, and Shadow and Phantom and Raven and Siren all flew down and hovered in the Mars sky before them, and Shadow growled and glared at them. The spirit dragons and Protectors had an awkward back and forth, and even Oliver called them the space dragons. However, eventually the Protectors returned back home. Jace suddenly arrives at the school, and he uses his mind control powers and mind controls Blake. And Blake goes white and red, and God, angel, demon, cat, wolf mode, and he has an all-out battle with the rest of the Protectors, and hurts all of them. However, Oliver started singing Believer by Imagine Dragons. He began fighting evil Blake 1v1 and beating him. And as he finished the song, he defeated Blake and turned him good again. Then Jace united his own team, a villain team, named the Destroyers. His team consisted of JACE, Dark, Blood Moon, Death, and a new villain named Shane. The Protectors have a huge and long drawn-out battle with the Destroyers, but it ends with the Destroyers winning. Luna, Dawn, Jack, and Marianne, all it was a depressing day. The Protectors returned home to the dorm and tried to recover and prepare for a final battle with the Destroyers. The Protectors tried again to kill the Destroyers, and it's somewhat successful. They kill most of them. However, Shane and Dark flee, and Jace brainwashes Akina to be a hunter again. However, that doesn't last long. The Protectors team up again, and target and fight Jace and kill him seemingly for good. And then, that night, the Protectors celebrate by doing food challenges back at the dorm. Eventually, Shadow and Phantom teamed up with Raven and Blue and Iris. And they all teamed up to fight Dark for one final battle. The Dragon War. Everyone fought in their dragon forms, and it ended with Shadow sacrificing himself and killing Dark for good. Eventually Blake and Venus got into a big verbal fight. It CUL I mated into Blake and Venus breaking up, and Blake punched down one of their cabin walls and abandoned her and Haru. Blake began training and living in a gym, and then the Protectors all met up in a barren, dusty, and empty dry battlefield. The Protectors broke into a civil war. Team Blake and Akina versus Team Venus and Oliver. It was a brutal and bloody battle, and Akina was seemingly killed. Oliver was killed, and it was the final standoff between Blake and Venus. Venus shot Blake in the back and left him bleeding out. On the battlefield, the Protectors were over. Months later, Blake and Venus met in a dark forest in the night rain, and they broke into a huge 1v1 battle, and it ended with Venus sparing Blake's life and flying away in a helicopter. Turns out Akina was alive, and she was healed, and Oliver was reborn. Due to him being a PHEONIX. Venus took Akina and Oliver to Blood Clan, and they stayed there and lived there. Blake spiraled down a dark path and became the new Hunter leader. Hunter Blake got his own Hunter armor. Rico returned to Earth, and met his black-haired fallen angel, Wolf Guy brother, named Keto, and he began a rivalry with him. Shadow somehow returned, and enacted a war on his brother, a brown-haired red-winged dragon named Drake. Rico and Shadow and Phantom all stayed, and lived with Venus and Akina and Oliver back at Blood Clan. Echo Clan was destroyed, and Delta Clan turned evil. Eventually, Blake met a new wolf girl with blue and purple hair, named Ashura, and he began dating her, and he had two other side chicks named Elizabeth and Scarlet, who became his Hunter side. Hunter Blake went and attacked Blood Clan. The Protectors had an all-out 3v1 vs Blake, and it led to Akina and Venus almost dying, and Oliver slammed Blake through the earth and back up again, and eventually Hunter Blake fled. Hunter Blake ran into Shadow and had an all-out battle with him, but there was no winner. Frost, Rico's old friend, became a rock star. Eventually Shane returned, stronger than ever, and he attacked Blood Clan, and Venus attacked in spy gear, and Oliver also attacked, but it wasn't enough, and Shane won. They decided the Protectors needed to unite one last time. And so Blake was way out in the woods, in a cabin, and he had grown a beard and lived with Ashura. As Blake left the cabin, he saw a huge explosion happen, and his eyes widened, and he leaped off towards it, and it led to the Protectors teaming up, one last time, to fight and kill Shane in a huge bloody battle. They did the job, and then they disbanded again. AKNA changed her name to Al, Liana, and the Protectors' story was seemingly over. Eventually, Rex, Spinox, a purple-haired girl, and a blue-haired spirit dragon, rose up and became the new team of Protectors. On Dracula's son. Jack the vampire also rose, met a human named Lila. However, the story seemingly ended. Enter the hybrid. Rico was introduced to the Hybrid Academy after his parents died. Blake and Seal, this universe Venus, were siblings. Bloodfang's children. Elizabeth and Scarlet and Jace were their siblings as well. Aliana, this universe Akina, was the daughter of Mani and Callum. Miller. She was a part of the Miller family, along with her siblings, Adjanun, Liliana, Karina. And Shane Akina ended up joining Jace and the Hunters for a means to make money after everyone was older. Shadow and Phantom were the children of Dark. Dark was the devil himself. They spent a lot of time in hell. However, on Earth, Shadow and Phantom met Siren, and eventually they fought Dark on the beach. Elizabeth and Scarlet were also Hunters. Drake, also way back in history, formed the Supernatural team, consisting of Jack, the vampire, and his sister, Celine, and a few others, and they all fought and killed Dracula. Shadow met a purple-haired girl spirit dragon named Ember. And they became friends. Eventually Dark and Death kidnapped Phantom and took her to hell. They experimented on her and cloned her twice. One clone being Raven and the other clone being Blood Moon. Shadow came and saved Phantom before Death RP3D her, and then it was a huge battle. Phantom and Siren began dating, and Shadow sapped Siren with blue lightning. Eventually Al Liana met a young girl named Jack, a girl with orange hair and deer antlers, and she took her in and moved into the Hybrid Academy and let Jack stay at her dorm. Eventually, Blake and Seal both joined the Hybrid Academy, and the Dark Archer, and Oliver Quinn from another universe, the Dark Ghostverse, was somehow here, and he was attending the Hybrid Academy and was in Dorm 65. Halver Seal was also in that dorm as well. This Oliver was Oliver Lee Quinn. Eventually, Blake and Seal and Aliana and Oliver and Rico all met in the school, and they became friends and moved into the same dorm, Dorm 65. This didn't last long though, because Jace came and blew up the entire Academy. Rico getting his wings complete charred, and then Hunter Aliana, who went by the Cody name, AKIN, attacked. And the Dark Archer, AK Oliver, fought her. Eventually, the friends all regrouped, and they convinced Aliana to turn good, and they became a team. They also got their own base. Jace had Tikina red hair, Aliana's girlfriend on the Hunter team. And after Aliana turned good, the team suited up, and they arrived in a Las Vegas city park, where Jace and the Hunters were waiting. The team fought them, and after a long battle, they cut off Jace's ears and won the fight. They returned to the base and decided to call themselves the Protectors. They then watched the sunrise. Seal was attacked by the Panic Room and got possessed by an angel named Dawn, and a demon named Luna. These two angel and demons happened to be lesbians and in love. They also became Seal's protectors. Seal discovered Blood Clan and fought Bloodfang. Blake discovered Delta Clan, and he met Arian and Ashura. He fell in love with Ashura, and he also got her pregnant. Seal met this guy named Liam, and had a kid named Haru with him. Blake met Arian, the leader of Blood Clan, and Arian trained Blake. Rico had a gladiator battle with his brother, Kito. Al. Liana met Kesha. A year later, Jace united his team of destroyers. Jace. Shane. Tikana. Dark. Kito. Elizabeth. Scarlet. And Rico disbanded from the Protectors. Jace came and kidnapped Haru, and used that to lead the Protectors to a trap where they were. Jumped by the destroyers. They destroyed the Protectors, and, while they managed to bring Haru. Home. Oliver Lee, Quinn was seemingly killed, but a huge explosion happened, and Oliver Lee. Quinn was sent back to the Dark Ghostverse, aka DGV, and the hybridverse Oliver J. Quinn was born. A red-haired Phoenix Red Wolf hybrid. Now, let's pause real fast and recap the Dark Ghostverse, leading up to Oliver Lee. Quinn. Getting sent to the hybridverse mysteriously.
8. Oliver Quinn originally was. 4 names, guy named Samuel Willie Quinn. And he was a part of royalty, however, that place fusion sucked, so other aliens came in and invaded the place and enslaved everybody. Oliver learned to survive. Doc J, or Dr. John, learned to be a villain, and Michael was an idiot villain. So anyway, ship blows up on primordial Earth, and Oliver does stuff for a few millions of years before becoming the Dark Archer and shooting dudes before fighting Doc J in 1958 and then becoming a Michael Quinn was a messed up child. In his teens, he found the box of Notagoodery and opened it and then became a narcissist. And then he was stupid until he was 17, and then the enslaving aliens came, did the stick and Michael Quinn thrived and was flexing each day until the ship blew up. And fast forward. Like millions of years in the 90s, Michael Quinn fought Oliver but lost and retreated to Puerto Rico. In the 90s, Michael Quinn meets with Satan and gets sent to the Blood Vault first, later, and they're like, Sally Q. Oliver talks about how much he hates his brother to his strong girl best friend Neptune who has blue hair. Eventually, Luke the White Archer shows up and blows up Oliver and escapes, and Oliver follows him to the Blood Vault first world. There he met Blake Jin Lupus, the BWV, or Blood Vault first version of Blake, and who ranted about Eminem and rap music. And then they stole a car until they found the White Archer and Jace Lupus, who was Blake's brother in this universe too. They fought, and also Michael was there, but he died. Eventually, Oliver got back to the Dark Ghostverse, but somehow he mysteriously went to the Hybridverse then. Woke up back in the Dark Ghostverse. This won't be the last we see of this version of Oliver Lee Quinn. But also another thing to mention is in this universe, Oliver in not this universe's Aliana, who is known as Breland Lee Miller, spent years in a military base, where Dr. John also experimented on this universe's version of Jack, who is known as Jack Smith Miller. This version of Jack became extremely strong. Now, real fast, let's cover the Blood Vault.
Blake and Jayask grew up as brothers, Blake being a wolf hybrid and Jace being a wolf skunk hybrid. Their father was a skunk hybrid named Crine. Their mother was a black wolf hybrid named Sheehan, who also slept with the hybridverse Bloodfang and gave birth to Bloodwolfverse Seal. Bloodwolfverse Seal is Blake and Jace's half-sister. Blake and Jace grew up loving each other, and both being hunters, but eventually met BWV, Rico, and Emma. Emma has a crush on Blake. Blake and JACE. Betrayed each other, and fought. And Jace slashed Blake's face. This one t'd be the last time we see. The Bloodwolfverse versions of Blake and Seal. P.S. Blake and Seal. Also met briefly, and Blake moved into the cabin that DGV Oliver met him in. Now let's get back to the hybrid. Oliver J. Quinn. Was officially the new hybridverse. Oliver and he. Along with the Protectors. Eventually, Jace came and turned Blake evil, and Blake attacked the Protectors, but as Believer played in the background. Oliver defeated Blake and turned him good again. The Protectors confronted the Destroyers and had a huge battle, and they defeated the Destroyers, seemingly. Jace was seemingly dead, and Shane and the rest fled. Kato was spared, and Tikana died. Galurulurur nam 77 Retululuramaluru nam 77 Re77 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 E77 E7RR 7R77 Rear 7 R7 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 Ear 7 R7 R7. Eventually Blake and Ashura got married. And Luna tripped and fell down the hill. Oliver J. Quinn discovered Echo Clan, and there he met Marianne, and he became best friends with her. He also met Psycho. Psycho was a blue-haired guy with glowing blue shield blades, and Oliver and Psycho became enemies. Oliver burned Psycho alive with his powers, and left him bald and charred.
Dark possessed Shadow. Recently, prior and that made him dark and moody, and also having anger issues. However now, Shadow got rid of him, and he got dark to flee.
Blake and Seal. Were arguing about the situation, with the fact that humans and hybrids had been at war for hundreds of years. Eventually the Protectors teamed up and ended up battling more Wendi Joes in the forest. Then Dark attacked them, and before Dark could kill them, Shadow and Phantom. Came in and rescued them, and then fought off Dark. Luna took Bloodfang. To the panic room, his fear being losing Seal. The Protectors and the Spirit Dragons teamed up and fought Dark, and Aliana went angel form and even went demon bot form, and together they all killed Dark. Deep in the hybrid. Forest, the Protectors. Built their new Protectors base, a blue and purple and green castle. And back at the academy, Kesha and Jack showed a new student around, named Melody. Melody ended up dating Kesha. 11 years had passed. Blake and Ashura had had a kid, and Ashura was pregnant again. Blake had also grown a beard. Seal was abandoned in the snow, bleeding out. Her mother then found her and took her back to Blood Clan and wrapped her in bandages and asked what happened. Oliver was out with Draven clubbing, and Draven had grown a beard. Draven had black and grey hair, and was a close friend of Quinn's single quotes, as Liana had met a girl named Seal and began dating her. And she had 2 kids with her, and the 4 of them plus Jack moved out to the Grand Canyon. 11 years later, they reminisced on the past. Eventually, events led to another, and the Protectors all reunited. For the first time in years, and Blake shaved his beard. However, what they didn't know was that JACE was somehow back. JACE had a plan to pit the Protectors against each other and get them to kill themselves, and he knew how to do it. During the 11 years, Shadow and Raven had fallen in love and started dating. 11 years later, Jace went and killed Raven and wrote Happy B-Day Shad, Protectors, in her blood on the floor. Shadow came home and exploded their entire home in rage, and he immediately flew to the Protectors. Base. RIKO. United with the Protectors for the first time in many years. Eventually, Shadow Dot crashed into the Protector's base and attacked the Protectors. He snapped Rico's neck, killing him, and then he almost killed Blake. But Blake pulled Dot out a spirit knife and stabbed Shadow. They explained that they didn single quotes T. Kill Raven, and Shadow said Phantom and Siren were also dead. Blake visited the White House and talked to President George W. Bush, and they agreed to have Blake make a speech in the White House. Blake made the speech, however, mid-speech. JACE. Came and blew up the White House. Blake escaped the explosion and was devastated. He flew back to Nevada. JACE also got back to Nevada. Blake returned to the Protector's base defeated, and he watched the TV and saw the humans preparing attacks on the hybrids. JACE visited Blood Clan and massacred every single one of the people there. Damien Griffin Haru, and he used Haru's blood and wrote with it a brotherly gift, Blake, and framed Blake for the Blood Clan. Killings. JACE then left Blood Clan in bloody ruins, a ghost town. Later that day, Seal. Returned to Blood Clan, and her entire world ended. She was so devastated, and when she found Haru's body, she broke. She saw the message, and without thinking, she immediately returned to go and kill. Blake was overcome with rage from the news, and he leaped at Kesha, who, in this universe, is a human Wolf hybrid, and he slammed her out of the base and began beating the hell out of her, until her girlfriend Melody came in to stop Blake, and Blake and Melody fought back and forth. Oliver came in and started beating the hell out of Blake, trying to knock him out and calm him down. But then Blake knocked him out, and then Aliana came in and began beating the hell out of Blake, and Blake almost killed her. That was UNTILL. Seal came in and began wailing on Blake. She was now in her white trench coat and a radioactive mask, and it was a bloody 1v1. UNTILL, the core four, Blake, Seal, Oliver, Aliana, were all fighting each other. UNTILL. Oliver was accidentally shot. And then, right there, the battle ended. Aliana left. Blake left to go clear his thoughts, and Seal stayed there and mourned Oliver. Jack and Leona went to go and find out that Jace was behind all of this, along. But they ended up finding out it was a trap, and Aliona got her head brutally blown to bits. Same with Jack, and blood splattered everywhere. Shadow traveled through the multiverse and portal ed. 2. The throne room of Raven. No, not the black-haired blind girl that Shadow was in love with. This is a new Raven, a pink-skinned, multicolored armor and hair goddess from the Warriorverse, and she was known in this multiverse as the mother of all hybrids. Shadow informed her that the hybrid verse was at a civil war, and Raven was now coming. Blake was traveling through the hybrid forest to Jace's hunter base, and then Seal was following him, along with Luna and Dawn. However, Seal told Luna and Dawn to return back, and this was between Seal and Blake. Blake and Seal crossed paths in the forest. The night sky loomed over them, and Blake and Seal engaged in a brutal fight. And it lasted a while and was bloody, and Blake even got one of his eyes ripped out and his arm ripped off. However, Blake exclaimed that Jace was behind all of this, and Seal spared him. The two siblings teamed up and went and found Jace in the sewers. And Jace went on an evil villain monologue, until the goddess Raven portaled there and ripped Jace's head clean off, and said, "It's over," and left. Blake and Seal were shocked. Later, the morning after, Blake had gotten into full hunter armor and became the new hunter leader. And Seal and Blake met up and felt some guilt about what they had done. However, Seal criticized him. Then suddenly, the entire universe collapsed, and everyone still alive died.
Real quick, let's get some random fun facts out of the way to avoid confusion later down the line as we continue.
1. Dark Ghostverse. Jack's father is the DGV variant of Blake Lupus, and in this universe, Blake Dot is a famous rapper in the Hybridverse and Homerverse. Jack's dad is a ginger Scottish Tiger King named Blake. However, this may be confusing, but it isn't a variant of Blake Lupus. This Dot is just guy with the name Blake. 2. Dark Ghostverse. Aliana, whose name is Breelin, is actually dead, and lives on as a ghost, which may be confusing, but she has a weird choker that somehow bounds her to the world. Alright, let's get back to the story. Raven recruited Dot, Shadow, and Ember from the Dot Hybridverse before it collapsed and turned them into her warriors. She sent Shadow and Ember to the Bloodwolf verse and the Dark Ghost verse to recruit those variants of the Protectors. She had Breelin Lee Miller, Dot Blake Jen Lupus, Dot Oliver Lee Quinn, Dot and Seal Irene Lupus, A Blake and Venus from the Bloodwolf verse, and A Oliver and Akina from the Dark Ghost verse. Raven declared them her Alpha Knights, the defenders of the universe. Dot Shadow and Ember took the Dot Alpha Knights to hell. There, the Alpha Dot Knights met the dead spirits of the Hybridverse Protectors, and the Alpha Knights and Protectors had some exchanges back and forth. Dot, eventually, an evil god named Smith recruited the Bloodwolfers Jace, and then Smith and JSE attacked Raven's castle. The Alpha Knights Dot fended them off, and then the Alpha Knights Dot began training for a final Dot battle with Smith. Eventually, the Alpha Knights Dot traveled to hell and had a Dot crazy final battle with Smith, and Jace even turned good again, and sacrificed himself to help them Dot win against Smith. Then the Alpha Knights returned home and celebrated. Seal met a boy in the Dot City and eventually began dating him. She also met the Luna and Dawn Dot from the Hybridverse, who managed to survive the collapse, and they all became friends. Oliver, the Dark Archer, fought Cupid and won. Blake got into a Dot battle with the White Archer, and lost some old friends like Ryan and Taylor. However, as the White Archer almost killed a random girl, Blake came in and saved her and went God mode and grew wings and evolved, and him and the girl began dating. The Alpha Knights and Raven were in a meeting, but then suddenly the meeting was crashed by Raven's evil sister, named Clio. Eventually, the Alpha Knights banded together to fight Clio, however went to hell, and turned the Hybridverse spirits into evil red versions of them, called the Anti-Knights. Clio sent the Anti-Knights to the Warriorverse, and the Anti-Knights had a crazy battle with the Alpha Knights. Eventually, the Alpha Knights recruited Sam and Jack from the DGV, and then they also recruited Shadow. However, previously, Shadow had tried to revive Hybridverse Phantom talking to death, but this resulted in a cosmic error, and Phantom came back with no memories, and was a man, and was angry and confused and seeked violence. Clio recruited this new Phantom. The Alpha Knights plus Shadow plus Ember plus Sam plus Jack all teamed up and not met with Clio plus Phantom plus the Anti-Knights, and they all erupted into battle. And Shadow and Ember and Phantom all went dragon form. For the first time, the Alpha Knights won the battle, and the Anti-Knights were killed. And Phantom fled the scene, and then Raven came and sent Clio to space jail. Later, Shadow ended up becoming a god, and teamed up with Aiden to take down some demons. Shadow and Phantom grew closer and became close again. Now being brothers, Breelin fought and killed Marnie. A few years later, Sam and Luna discovered an ancient alien race in the panic room. The alien's name was G-Dead. G-Dead was released, and awoken and began wreaking havoc on the Warriorverse. G begins using his SHAPES, HIFTING, abilities to mimic past characters. G mimics Hybridverse, Dark and Death, and Blood Moon, and attacks Shadow and Phantom. Shadow and Phantom fight one final time together before Shadow sacrifices himself to save Phantom, and G reveals himself, and Phantom gets out of there alive. Also, a quick thing to mention. But, back before G was discovered, Blake had a dream where other versions of him came and met him. He met Hybridverse Blake and a mysterious other Blake, and they fought multiple versions of Jace. And Braylon was there, and they were in hell. However, it was all a dream. Now, the Alpha Knights unite with Jack, and Sam, and Bloodwolfers, Rico, and they head to an abandoned ravine because somehow the Hybridverse destroyers were back, except they weren't. It was an G hallucination. The Alpha Knights fought long and hard, but then realized it was a hallucination. G almost killed Raven, but then G was banished to a mushroom planet, and the core for Alpha Knights, Blake, Braylon, Oliver, and Seal, all arrived there and began fighting G. Now this wasn't the first time they fought G, back a day ago. They fought him for the first time in a small town, and Luna and Dawn both died. However now, this is the final battle, life or death, to save the universe. It was a long and brutal fight. Braylon was killed in battle, and then next to die was Seal, as she sacrificed herself to weaken GI. The battle was coming to a close, as Blake and Oliver did the final combo blow and put all of their power into killing G. And then G exploded dead, and Oliver fell to the ground dying. And as Oliver died in Blake's arms, Blake cried. While G had wreaked havoc, it collapsed the Dark Ghost verse, and it collapsed the Bloodwolf verse. And in the end, the Alpha Knights won, but at what cost? Blake had recently had a daughter with his girlfriend, and the daughter's name was Legend. What hasn't been mentioned yet is this variant of Blake, the BWV version, is immortal. However, after this final fight, Blake retired from being an Alpha Knight, and he went to Aiden and made Aiden do a spell to make him mortal. Blake and Aiden mourned the graves for a while. And then, as the sun set, Blake decided to live the rest of his life with his family. Finally, let's cover the Alphaverse and Crystal Veil verse. We will call the Alphaverse the AV and the Crystal Veil verse the KVV. Introducing the star of the KVV, a new Oliver variant, his name being Oliver Luciana Quinn. He was born in South America, and his parents die by Mida's hand. His aunt swoops in and beats up the villain for a bit, before saving the baby. Things are chill for 7 years until she dies by Midas, and then his uncle just vanishes into the multiverse. Then he embarks on a journey throughout South America and Mexico, before sneaking past ice and getting into California, where he chills in an orphanage for 5 more years. Until Midas returns, and he gets beaten by the orphan, Oliver. Then Quinn moves to a swampy place, befriends some frog people, and then fistfights a mayor, before returning to Gem City, and then meeting other superheroes like Tagori and Scarlet Sword. Another year goes by, and he's 14, and he finds out he has siblings, and he beats the Illuminati to Britney Spears, and they all chill for a minute, before a serial killer named Bloodblade shows up and starts murdering a bunch of orphans and couples and orphaned couples, and couples of orpha. He even murdered Quinn's sister Neptune, and then Quinn figured out it was his old friend Matthew Valentino Rivera. And so, after a brief fight, Quinn got his arm cut off and tortured before police shows up and arrest Bloodblade, and Quinn escapes and retires from Heronis for a solid half, and Quinn would be celebrating his 17th birthday. But to racist aliens, Midas and a mercenary hired by Midas show up and cue a long fight scene where Daiquiri and Zealot, the racist aliens, need. Quinn gets a new crystalline arm. Daybreak, the mercenary hired by Midas, gets knocked into a car, and Midas nearly dies, but then Daybreak is like, no you don't, kill, you stupid idiot, and so Quinn just beats up the millennia-old man with the vendetta, and then gets a new sense of justice again, and decides to keep fighting in the name of his sister, but then shenanigans happen, and then his brother dies. Now let's cover the AV real fast. The star of the AV, Blake Andre Lupus, was born, from his mother, who nobody knows about, and Crotac lupus, ... while here. It's safe to mention that Seal was also born from the ... same mother, but her father is Bloodfang. ... In this universe, the lupus family is rich and ... evil. Crotac, Blake's father, is P3D0 Phil 3 ... and his older son Jace is raised to also ... be one. Jace early on started recruiting and building his hunter army, which took years ... growing up. Crotac physically abused and are at Blake many times, and this lasted for years until Blake ... stole all of Crotac's money and escaped the tower. Blake built his underground bunker, semi-close to the city he was raised in, Alpha City, and he spent years building the Wolfbane suit, and then when he finished and turned 18, he ... became known as the Masked Vigilante, the Wolfbane who would brutally and violently murder and slaughter criminals and P3DOP, one less, and anyone he deemed evil. He was the Wolfbane ... He saved a young girl one night named Lily, and took her in, and protected and fed her. He also became hypersexual. In response to his trauma and the killing he did was kind of like a coping mechanism for him. Blake had issues dating, and was cheated on once by a blonde bunny hybrid named Evie, and he brutally murdered her. That night ... After that, he stuck to nightly one-night stands ... He eventually fought and murdered Crotac. And then he spent a lot of time trying to kill Jace, many nights. Eventually, KVV Oliver would ... mess with stuff and end up being sent to the AV, where ... he would meet AV Blake, and ... Blake would attack him and begin beating the hell out of him. However, after their battle, they would team up and become friends. And then, Oliver returned to the KVV. AV Shadow is evil and a god-killer, and he would go ... on to kill his father. In this universe, Lucifer, and he would kill ... all of the 7 deadly sins, and he would kill almost all of the gods. Also, AV Jace worships Satan. However, he is not a Satanist. KVV Oliver would visit the AV pretty often, and eventually he met his true love there, Harper, and the two began dating. Eventually, Blake met Nova, a girl from the moon, who had a personality similar to Oliver's, and Blake fell in love with her, and they began dating, and she was the first girl to be in a healthy relationship with him. Back to the Homiverse. In the past many years that have gone by, many things have changed. Venus changed her name to Seal, and Blake moved somewhere else, and Akina changed her name, and she died. The 3 remaining protectors, all reunited for the first time in so long, and Blake was different and angry, and Oliver was thrilled to see them. Eventually, they were attacked by the new destroyers, consisting of a terrifying cyborg Jace, Midas, Dakari, and more. The fight was brutal, and it seemed as if the protectors lost. Darkmind changed his name to Aiden, and looked odd, and also had a new, possessed demon with him. During all this, Shadow lived, and had gone insane, and Raven and Phantom somehow also lived. However, now Phantom had transitioned into a man. Shadow reunites with Phantom and Raven. However, Shadow is now insane, and he fights Savian and starts beef with Phantom. And he even masters the Panic Room. However, Luna, who had become extremely powerful, came and played with him, evilly, and even almost killed him. But Phantom tried to stop it. And that's where the Golden Age story ends. And all of this is in the Golden Age multiverse. Also, TCMV stands for the Cryptic Multiverse. You should join the TCMV Discord server for new story updates and to join in. You could also join the TCMV Lore Archive server to dive deep into the nitty-gritty.